The flight that landed without a crew, Flight 207, was supposed to be an ordinary red-eye journey from Denver to Portland, just another quiet late-night flight under heavy, low-hanging clouds. It departed at 11:47 p.m., slightly behind schedule due to the dense fog blanketing the tarmac. The Boeing 737 taxied down the runway, its engines roaring against the backdrop of misty night. Inside the cabin, 119 passengers settled into their seats, most already dozing off, headphones on, windows shut. Nothing out of the ordinary. Not yet. Captain Martin Rhodes, a 26-year veteran, sat in the cockpit beside First Officer Ellen Garvey, one of the airline's best new pilots. The takeoff was smooth. The air traffic controllers at Denver recorded nothing unusual in the communication logs during ascent. The plane reached cruising altitude at 36,000 feet. Lights dimmed, and the cabin crew began their slow march down the aisles with drink carts. Then, at exactly 12:28 a.m., Flight 207 stopped responding. ATC made their routine check-in call, no response. Another minute passed. Still nothing. It wasn't just static or garbled audio, it was pure silence, as though the plane had vanished. The dispatcher tried again. Still no word from the cockpit. The aircraft appeared on radar, continuing along its flight path, but communications had gone completely dead. Protocol dictated escalating the situation. The FAA was notified. Emergency frequencies were engaged. Still nothing. By 12:41 a.m., the tension had escalated to full alert. Two F-16 fighter jets were scrambled from an airbase in Idaho to intercept and visually inspect the aircraft. The jets caught up with Flight 207 within minutes. The pilots of the intercept team, Captains Janssen and Morales, approached from either side of the 737 and reported something no one could explain. The cockpit was visibly empty. No sign of Captain Rhodes or First Officer Garvey. The windows were dark, yet instrument panels flickered inside with a faint red glow, pulsing unnaturally. "Do you see that?" Janssen radioed. "There's no one at the controls." "Copy," Morales responded. "It's like it's flying itself." The jets escorted the silent aircraft as it continued toward Portland. But the horror had just begun. Inside the cabin, if one had been there to see, the passengers sat still, unmoving, unblinking, not in sleep, but something much more terrifying. Their bodies upright, seatbelts fastened, hands on armrests, every face wearing the same expression. A frozen, wide-mouthed scream, eyes bulged in terror. As if something had paralyzed them all in the exact instant of a shared nightmare. Flight 207 made a slow, calculated descent, but no commands were heard. No mechanical warnings. The jet banked smoothly and aligned itself with runway 33R at Portland International Airport, a disused runway under construction. No flight plan had marked it as a destination. The plane landed without issue, perfectly in fact. Too perfectly, emergency services were waiting. Police, TSA, Homeland Security, even the National Transportation Safety Board. They approached the silent aircraft with weapons drawn, expecting a hostage situation, perhaps a terrorist hijack. But the door was unlocked, no resistance. And what they found inside would torment the investigators for the rest of their lives. All 119 passengers, dead but untouched. Their bodies not stiff from rigor mortis, but suspended in a state that defied medical explanation. No wounds, no blood, no signs of trauma. Faces distorted in identical horror. Eyes that had seen something they could never unsee. When they reached the cockpit, both seats were empty. The autopilot was off. The control yoke rested neutral. The black box had been recording the entire flight. The audio began normally. Captain Rhodes greeting air traffic control. Routine. Readings, cabin pressure check. And then, at 12:26 a.m., 2 minutes before contact was lost, Rhodes' voice, calm at first, spoke. "We're seeing some movement in the clouds. Looks like lightning, but it's vertical." First Officer Garvey responded, "It's not lightning. Look at the shape, it's almost like arms." Rhodes again, voice tightening, "It's outside the cockpit. How is that possible?" The final transmission sent a shiver through every technician listening to the tape. "They're in the clouds, ... They're already in." That's when the whispers began, indistinct, dozens of voices overlapping. Speaking no known language, the volume fluctuated wildly. Audio techs tried to isolate the frequencies, but reported strange anomalies. The whispers, when played backward, seemed to form complete sentences in English. They followed the sound. "We live in the static, once seen, never unseen." Even stranger, the black box had continued recording after the engines shut down. 3 hours beyond landing, the device picked up more whispers, low rhythmic pulses, and the sound of children laughing faintly beneath white noise. Then silence. No pilot, no co-pilot, no flight plan. FAA records showed that Flight 207 had never been scheduled. No plane by that ID had taken off from Denver. Even more chilling, the aircraft's tail number didn't match any known in the airline's registry. Boeing was contacted. Their records indicated that the serial number of the craft had belonged to a plane, decommissioned in 1997 after a fatal crash over the Rockies. Security footage at Denver International showed Gate A17 being empty all night. No boarding, no crew, nothing. But 119 cell phones were recovered from inside the plane. Many had dead batteries, but some still held power. None had service. Yet in each device's camera roll was the same final image. A shadowy figure standing at the end of the aisle, tall and shrouded, eyes like mirrors reflecting static. The time stop? 12:28 a.m. Soon after the incident, the whispers began to bleed into frequencies around Portland. Ground control operators started hearing voices when tuning into channel 121.5. Pilots flying overhead reported sudden chills and malfunctions in autopilot systems. The runway where the plane had landed was sealed off indefinitely. One by one, the investigators quit. Some spoke of recurring dream screens in clouds, hands scraping across windows, and that figure in the aisle reaching closer with each nightmare. 2 of them disappeared without a trace. Portland International quietly renamed its terminals and rerouted future flights to avoid drawing attention. Gate A17 at Denver was removed entirely, and as for the aircraft, it was dismantled piece by piece and stored in a classified facility. But workers reported strange event stools vanishing, radios turning on by themselves, and sometimes hearing those whispers. To this day, no one knows what happened on Flight 207. Some believe it crossed into a place it shouldn't have. Some believe it brought something back with it. But one thing is certain, whenever you fly through a storm at night and the clouds swirl a little too close to the wing, don't look too hard. Because they might be looking back. Terminal 6 doesn't exist. Jason Wells had always considered himself a rational man, a frequent flyer, tech consultant, and habitual airport drifter. He had spent countless hours in terminals across the country. Chicago O'Hare was practically his second home. So when he landed on a chilly November evening with a 3-hour layover, he didn't think twice about grabbing a coffee and wandering the terminal like he always did. Terminal 3, Gate K15, that's where he'd landed. He knew the layout well. Every shop, every hallway. Or so he thought. It started with a sign. He nearly walked past it, one of those overhead directional signs hanging from the ceiling. Black background, white letters. It pointed toward baggage claim, Terminal 5, and then, oddly, Terminal 6. Jason stopped. He squinted up at it, confused. Terminal 6? He turned to a nearby cleaning lady. "Excuse me, is Terminal 6 new?" She gave him a puzzled look. "Honey, there's no Terminal 6 at O'Hare." Jason looked back at the sign, but the words were still there. Terminal 6 gates 6A to 6E. He decided to follow it. Curiosity, boredom, a slight buzz from the second espresso. The further he walked, the quieter it became. The hum of the crowd thinned until it was replaced by a low-frequency vibration, almost like a pulse in his ears. He noticed there were no advertisements for familiar brands. Instead, there were faded posters for airlines he had never heard of: Pan, Central, Vistalux, Monarch Skyways. Destinations like Yugoslavia, Prussia, and Bombay. Places either long gone or renamed decades ago. The lights flickered, but just enough to make him notice. The floor beneath him changed from shiny tile to worn, discolored linoleum. He glanced around. No staff, no security, no other passengers. He checked his phone, no signal. That was odd for O'Hare. Then he saw it. Gate 6C. It was at the end of a long hallway that felt like it stretched too far, like the space was bending slightly. Parked just beyond the glass was a plane. Jet black, featureless, sleek. No airline branding. No identification numbers. Nothing. Jason felt his breath catch. There was something off about its size, larger than a commercial plane. But with fewer windows. Standing by the gate was a woman in a dull gray uniform. Her skin was pale, not just light skin pale like old wax. Her eyes were too large. Her smile was perfectly still. When she saw him, she spoke. Final boarding call for the forgotten. Her voice didn't echo in the hall. It echoed inside his skull. Jason took a step back. He didn't remember moving forward, but somehow he was just feet away from the gate. "Boarding closes in 2 minutes, the attendant said. He turned and ran. The hallway seemed longer now. The walls curved. The lights dimmed, then grew brighter. He ran harder, heart pounding. At last he burst through a swinging door and into the main terminal. It was full, crowded. No one even glanced at him. He turned to go back through the hallway, but it wasn't there. It was just a service closet. Breathing hard, Jason approached a security desk. "Hey, is there a Terminal 6 here?" "I think I got turned around," the guard chuckled. "Nope, never has." "Been, might be thinking of another airport," he pressed. "Are you sure?" "There was a hallway, signs. Gate 6C. The guard raised an eyebrow. "There's no Gate 6C. Maybe get some rest, sir." "You look pale." Jason returned to his gate, shaken. He said nothing to anyone. Just boarded his next flight, trying to convince himself it was a dream or a prank. But something gnawed at him. Back home in Portland, sleepless and unsettled, he dug into aviation history forums. He searched for old O'Hare blueprints. No Terminal 6, not in the 80s, not before, nothing. On an obscure aviation thread, he found a scanned newspaper clipping from 1963, a photo. A group of people standing in front of a strange black airplane. Boarding stairs connected to Gate 6C at O'Hare. Jason's blood ran cold. The faces in the photo, he recognized them. The man with the bowler hat, the girl in the polka dot dress, the woman with the broken glasses, all people he had passed in that hallway. They hadn't aged a day. He showed the photo to his coworker. "Jason, are you okay? That photo's been debunked. It's just creepypasta, urban legend. There's no record of any passengers. Just a story someone made up." Jason nodded, played along. But that night, he checked the security camera footage. From his Ring app, he swore he saw a flicker, a figure standing at the end of his driveway. A pale woman in a dull gray uniform. The next night, she was at his window. Now, he doesn't sleep. Every time he closes his eyes, he hears that voice. Final boarding call for the forgotten. And the hallway's always waiting. The passenger who wasn't on the manifest was supposed to be a routine domestic flight, Alpine Air 4321, departing Seattle-Tacoma International Airport at 6:45 p.m. en route to Boise, Idaho. It was a smaller regional aircraft, only 72 passengers. Aboard, most of them business travelers and locals heading home for the weekend. The sky was clear, the weather mild, and the flight crew ran through pre-departure protocols without issue. Flight attendant Sarah Jensen had worked dozens of these runs. Uneventful, short, and familiar. She was midway through securing the cabin when she noticed something off. A man in seat 23A. He wore a long oversized trench coat and a wide-brimmed hat, the kind that made it nearly impossible to see his face. His posture was stiff, both hands resting perfectly parallel on his knees. He didn't acknowledge her when she greeted the passengers in his row. Didn't blink, didn't move, just stared ahead. Sarah felt a chill, not fear, just something unsettling. As the plane took off, she moved down the aisle, serving drinks and checking belts. When she returned to row 23, she saw the woman originally assigned to 23B had switched seats. She was now 3 rows ahead. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked her. The woman, middle-aged, soft-spoken, nodded. "That man, he just gave me the creeps. Didn't say anything, didn't look at me. Just sat there staring. I couldn't sit next to him." Sarah smiled politely and nodded, though the feeling in her stomach had tightened. She pulled out her tablet and checked the passenger manifest. 23A was listed as unassigned. That couldn't be right. She double-checked. Seat 23B, Miriam Collins. But 23A, blank. She flagged the issue to the cockpit. "Probably a glitch," the captain replied. "I'll send the co-pilot to check." Moments later, First Officer Trevor Voss walked down the aisle, leaned toward Sarah, and nodded toward the back. "That the guy?" She nodded. Voss approached 23A slowly. Passengers turned to watch, sensing something was off. But when he reached the row, the seat was empty. "He was just here," Sarah said. Her voice hushed. Trevor checked the seat. Still warm. The woman in 23B, Miriam, turned around. "No, he was there. I saw him. I switched seats because he was there." They swept the cabin. Checked the lavatories. Storage closets. Nothing. The cockpit door had remained locked since takeoff. They made a cabin-wide announcement, asking for anyone not in their assigned seat to notify the crew. Nothing. Everyone on the manifest was accounted for. Sarah and Trevor exchanged glances. They didn't say it aloud, but the same thought passed between them. Where had he gone? Roughly 45 minutes into the flight, the aircraft hit turbulence. Violent, unexpected, and jarring. The plane dipped so sharply that oxygen masks nearly deployed. Passengers screamed. Drinks spilled. Bags shifted in overhead bins. Then a sudden stillness. Too still. The turbulence stopped as abruptly as it started. The cabin lights flickered and went out, leaving the plane bathed in a dull emergency glow. For nearly 10 seconds, the only sound was the wind outside. Then the lights came back, and every passenger was asleep. Except Sarah. She stood in the aisle, eyes wide, looking around. Every head lolled to the side, eyes shut, breathing steady. But Miriam Collins was gone. Row 23 was empty. 23A and 23B, both vacant. Miriam's purse still hung on the armrest. Her coat was still folded in the overhead compartment. Her boarding pass was tucked in the seat pocket. Panic set in. Sarah shook the passengers awake. One by one, they stirred, disoriented, confused, but none had seen or heard anything. No one saw Miriam leave. No one saw anyone walk the aisles. The cockpit responded to her frantic calls. They swore they hadn't left the flight path. No doors had been opened. The plane was sealed. Upon landing in Boise, security was waiting. Every passenger was questioned. Luggage was checked. Video footage reviewed. Miriam Collins was declared missing, but the story didn't end there. During the post-landing inspection, technicians pulled the cockpit voice recorder, the black box, for standard checks. Nothing seemed out of place until they reached the audio from the turbulence. Underneath the roar of wind and creaking metal, there was something else. A whisper, faint, layered beneath the noise. It didn't come from the cockpit, nor any part of the plane. They isolated the frequency. Repeated 3 times. She sat in my seat. The flight crew was grounded for psychological evaluation. Alpine Air quietly removed the aircraft from service. It was placed in long-term storage in a Nevada hangar, but strange reports followed. Technicians working on nearby aircraft claimed to see a shadow sitting in the plane's last row, a tall figure with a hat. When approached, the figure was gone. One tech quit after claiming he heard a voice whispering directly into his radio headset while alone in the hangar. His logbook entry read, "He wants her back." Sarah quit flying. She moved to a quiet town in Montana, tried to forget. But on cold nights, when the wind picked up, she sometimes heard a knock at her door. No one there. Just an airplane boarding. Pass folded, weathered, slipped under the frame. The name on it? Miriam Collins, Flight 4321, Seat 23B.